Why do tipping customs confuse almost everyone who visits the US? If you have ever eaten dinner with someone visiting the US for the first time, you have probably watched them stare at a check with quiet panic. 15%, 18, 20. A calculator comes out. Someone asks if the tip is before or after tax. And somewhere in that moment, a person who has eaten in restaurants their entire life in their own country suddenly looks like they have never paid for food before. Almost nowhere else in the world works this way. In Japan, tipping can be seen as an insult. In France, it is built into the price already. In Australia, nobody expects it at all. But in the US, the menu price is basically a lie. The real price comes later, in your head, while you do math at the table. And the strange part is that Americans do not find this confusing. They grew up inside it. It is visitors who notice that something is wrong with the system, because they are the only ones looking at it from outside. So here's the part that explains everything. Tipping in America was never designed. It was inherited from a single decision made over 150 years ago, and nobody ever went back to fix it. After the Civil War, formerly enslaved black workers needed jobs, and many were hired into service industries, restaurants, railroads, especially the Pullman sleeping car company, where black porters worked for wages so low that employers expected tips to cover the rest. The logic at the time was blunt. Employers didn't have to pay a living wage if customers were already paying it for them. Tipping wasn't generosity. It was a way to avoid paying workers directly. This got written into law. In 1938, the U.S. created its first federal minimum wage. But restaurant owners lobbied hard, and a separate lower minimum wage for tipped workers was carved out instead. Today, the federal tipped minimum wage is $2.13 an hour. It has not changed since 1991. The rest is supposed to come from tips, which means in the U.S., your server's actual income depends on strangers doing arithmetic correctly at the end of a meal. To an American server, this is just how the job works. You factor it into your life the same way you factor in rent. But to someone visiting from a country where a waiter's paycheck is a paycheck, the entire interaction looks bizarre. They are not just paying for a meal. They are unknowingly being asked to fund someone's wage, and nobody explained the rules before they sat down. And this is where it gets even stranger. The tipping system spread far beyond restaurants. Bartenders, hairdressers, taxi drivers, hotel staff, even some delivery apps now suggest a tip before you've received the service at all. The percentage keeps climbing too. 20% used to be considered generous. Now some payment screens default to 25%. Nobody voted on this. No law raised the expected amount. It crept upward because the system runs on social pressure instead of a fixed price, and social pressure only moves in one direction. Here's the part that visitors usually find hardest to believe. Many Americans don't actually like this system either. Surveys consistently show that most U.S. diners find tipping stressful, confusing, or unfair. Servers often say they'd prefer a flat, livable wage instead of relying on the mood of every customer. But nobody can opt out individually. If one restaurant decides to pay full wages and ditch tipping, its prices look 30% higher than the place next door, even if the total cost to the customer is the same. So, restaurants stay locked into a system almost everyone privately dislikes, because being the first to leave, it makes you look more expensive than your competitors. That's the trap. Not malice, not tradition anyone is proud of, just a system where leaving it costs you more than staying in it, even when staying in it makes no sense. Visitors don't carry any of that context with them. They just see a printed price, a final total that's different, and a stranger standing nearby waiting to see what they decide their labor was worth. In most countries, that decision was already made for them by the business before they ever sat down. In America, it gets handed to a tourist with a fork still in their hand. And somewhere in a restaurant tonight, a visitor is doing the same quiet math at the table, multiplying a number they don't fully understand, for a system nobody currently running it actually chose.